What if destiny is not something waiting in the future, but something we are living right now without noticing? What if the stories we hear about Shiva, Vishnu and Brahma are not about a moment in time, but about something much deeper inside human life? And why do so many people search for a date, a point in history when divine forces will take control of the world, even though no ancient text clearly gives such a timeline? Across history, humans have always tried to connect mystery with certainty. When life feels uncertain, we look for answers in stories, symbols, and beliefs. In Indian tradition, Shiva, Vishnu, and Brahma are not described as rulers waiting to conquer a land in a physical sense. Instead, they are understood as symbolic forces: creation, preservation, and transformation. These ideas are found in ancient texts like the Puranas and Upanishads, but they are mainly philosophical, not calendar-based predictions. Still, over time, storytelling and interpretation sometimes mix with imagination, and new ideas appear in modern discussions, especially online. Today, we live in a world where information spreads fast. A single idea can travel across millions of people in seconds. In this flow, ancient symbols can sometimes be turned into future events, even when there is no clear historical or scriptural support for that. This is why it is important to slow down and understand the original meaning before accepting modern interpretations. This video is not about predicting a date that does not exist in verified sources. Instead, it is about understanding why such questions appear, what these divine symbols really mean, and how they connect to real human life, our choices, struggles, and changes. It is about seeing mythology not as a distant prediction, but as a mirror of human experience. If you stay until the end, you will see how these ancient ideas can still speak to real problems in today's world, and why destiny may not be something written in the sky, but something shaped in every moment of life. If this kind of deep storytelling helps you see things differently, you can support the channel by liking and subscribing for more meaningful mythological stories that focus on understanding rather than confusion. Now let's begin this journey into the idea of destiny itself. Have you ever asked yourself why humans cannot accept uncertainty and always try to find answers about the future? Why do we feel comfort when we believe destiny is already written somewhere? And why do questions about gods, fate, and future events become more powerful when life feels confusing? From a factual point of view, across many ancient civilizations, India, Greece, Egypt, and others, people created stories to explain things they could not control. Natural events like rain, storms, birth, and death were often understood through symbolic stories, not scientific knowledge. In Indian tradition, figures like Shiva, Vishnu, and Brahma appear in texts such as the Puranas as symbolic representations of creation, balance, and transformation. These are philosophical ideas, not confirmed historical rulers of time or world events. But from a human point of view, there is another reason these stories remain alive. People naturally want safety. When the future is unclear, the mind looks for patterns. This is not a myth. It is a known human behavior studied in psychology. When life feels unstable, humans often turn to stories that feel stable, even if they are symbolic. This is why ideas about destiny, fate, and divine plans become so powerful. In many cases, stories about gods are passed through generations in different ways. Over time, meanings can slowly change. A symbol can become a belief, and a belief can sometimes be treated like a prediction. This is where confusion often begins. Ancient texts like the Vedas and Upanishads focus more on knowledge, nature, and inner understanding rather than exact future dates or political events. If someone wants to verify this, these texts are available in translated academic collections and study resources, not just online posts. In today's world, uncertainty is still everywhere. People face pressure from work, society, and personal struggles. Because of this, the mind still searches for something steady to believe in. That is why questions about destiny and divine control still appear again and again in modern discussions. But when we look closely, this chapter of understanding shows something important. The search for destiny is not really about gods or dates. It is about human fear, hope, and the need to feel that life has meaning even when answers are not clear. What if the way we understand time today is completely different from how ancient people saw it? Why do some stories describe time as repeating cycles instead of a straight line? And why do modern people often try to place exact dates on ancient symbolic ideas that were never meant to work like a calendar? In many Indian philosophical traditions, time is often explained as cyclical, not linear. This idea appears in concepts like yugas, Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, and Kali Yuga. These are described in texts such as the Puranas, where time moves in repeating cycles of rise and decline. However, it is important to understand that these descriptions are symbolic and philosophical. They are not designed as exact scientific timelines with fixed calendar dates. They express patterns of change in human behavior, society, and morality over long periods. In contrast, modern thinking is mostly linear. We see time as a straight line: past, present, future. This makes us want exact answers, like when will something happen? Or on what date will a change come? This difference in thinking often creates confusion when people try to mix ancient symbolic stories with modern expectations of exact timing. Because of this difference, some people today misunderstand mythological ideas and try to turn them into fixed predictions. But if we look carefully at traditional texts like the Vedas, Upanishads, and Puranic stories, they rarely focus on exact future dates. Instead, they focus on understanding life, duty, nature, and human behavior. Scholars and translators who study these texts often explain that the main goal is guidance, not prediction. These texts can be explored in academic translations and research publications for clearer understanding. Another important point is how human imagination fills gaps when information is not complete. When stories pass through generations, they naturally change slightly in meaning. Oral tradition, cultural storytelling, and modern media can all reshape how ancient ideas are understood. This is not unusual. It happens in many cultures across the world. So when people ask about a specific date for divine events, it reflects more of a modern way of thinking than an ancient one. Ancient time was not about scheduling events like a calendar. It was about understanding cycles of change in life and nature. In simple terms, this chapter shows a key idea. Misunderstanding often happens not because myths are wrong, but because we are reading ancient symbolic time through a modern lens that expects exact answers. Have you ever seen a powerful title online that says something like "Hidden Truth About Gods" or "Future Divine Event Revealed" and wondered if it is real? Why do such ideas spread so fast on social media? And how do ancient symbolic stories slowly turn into modern viral claims that sound like predictions? Today, one of the biggest reasons for confusion is the way information spreads on the internet. Social media platforms, short videos, and posts can reach millions of people in a very short time. But speed does not always mean accuracy. Many viral stories mix real mythology with imagination or personal interpretation. For example, figures like Shiva, Vishnu, and Brahma come from ancient texts such as the Puranas and Upanishads, where they represent deep ideas about life and existence. However, online content sometimes changes these symbolic meanings into fixed events or future predictions, even when no original source clearly supports that. Another important factor is how headlines are designed. Many online posts use simple and emotional words to grab attention. This is not unique to mythology. It happens in many topics online. A complex idea is often reduced into a short, powerful sentence, so people will click or watch. But when deep philosophical ideas are reduced too much, the original meaning can be lost. This is why checking original sources like translated scriptures, academic studies, or reliable historical commentaries becomes important. These sources help separate interpretation from original text. There is also a strong emotional side to this. Many people feel uncertain about the world today: economy, relationships, future, and identity. When people feel this way, they naturally look for answers that feel simple and meaningful. Stories about destiny or divine control can feel comforting, even if they are not meant as literal predictions. This emotional connection is real and understandable, but it can sometimes make symbolic stories appear more factual than they actually are. At the same time, it is important to be honest. Not everything online is wrong, but not everything is verified either. Some content creators may not intentionally mislead, but information can still become distorted when it is repeated, shortened, or taken out of context. So this chapter shows a clear message. The internet does not create myths, but it can reshape them. And when symbolic ideas move too fast without understanding their original meaning, they can become something very different from what ancient texts actually intended. If we look at the idea of Shiva, Vishnu, and Brahma carefully, one question naturally comes up. Are they meant to be understood as physical rulers of the world, or as something deeper inside life itself? And why do ancient stories describe them in ways that feel more symbolic than literal? In many traditional Hindu philosophical ideas, especially those found in texts like the Puranas, the Trimurti is explained through three main functions of existence. Brahma is linked with creation, Vishnu with preservation, and Shiva with transformation or change. These are not described as political leaders or future conquerors of any land. Instead, they are symbolic ways to understand how life begins, continues, and changes. This is a key point often discussed in comparative religion and philosophy studies, where mythology is seen as a system of meaning rather than a prediction system. When we think of Brahma as creation, it can be understood in simple daily life terms: new ideas forming in the mind, new life beginning, or new projects starting. Vishnu represents stability and balance, like how societies, families, and nature need order to continue. Shiva represents change, which can feel like ending, but also creates space for new beginnings. These ideas are not separate events happening in the sky. They are patterns that can be observed in human life and nature itself. It is important to clearly separate fact from interpretation here. The original texts do not describe these forces as planning future global events with fixed dates. Instead, they use stories and symbols to explain how the universe is understood in a philosophical way. If someone wants to study this more deeply, translations of the Vedas, Upanishads, and Puranic texts available through academic publishers or university resources are more reliable than simplified online summaries. Another key idea is that symbolism allows different meanings for different people. One person may see Shiva as a spiritual concept of change, while another may see him as part of cultural tradition. Both interpretations can exist, but they should not be confused with literal historical predictions. When we step back, the Trimurti idea becomes less about external control and more about internal understanding. It shows a pattern that repeats in everything around us: beginning, balance, and change. This is why these figures continue to be meaningful even today, not as rulers of time, but as symbols of how life itself moves forward. Have you ever felt like life is already decided for you? Like no matter what you do, the outcome is fixed somewhere? Or have you noticed how two people can face the same situation but end up with completely different results? And if destiny is fixed, then why do choices still change everything we experience in life? In many Indian philosophical traditions, the idea of karma is often explained as action and result. This is not meant as punishment or reward in a simple sense, but as a natural cause and effect system. What we do influences what we experience later. This idea appears in texts like the Upanishads and Bhagavad Gita, where action and responsibility are given more focus than fixed fate. However, interpretations can vary, and different schools of thought explain karma in different ways, so it is not a single, rigid definition. From a practical point of view, destiny is often understood as something shaped over time, not something locked at birth. A person's life is influenced by many factors: family, education, environment, decisions, and even chance events. Because of this, many thinkers explain that while some conditions may be outside control, human action still plays a strong role in shaping direction. This is why two people starting in similar situations can move toward very different futures. A simple example can be seen in daily life. One person may wait for opportunities, believing everything is already decided, while another person actively learns, adapts, and takes small steps forward. Over time, their experiences become very different. This does not mean life is fully controlled by effort alone, but it shows how action and decision-making are deeply connected to outcomes. It is important to be clear and honest here. There is no verified scientific or historical proof that destiny is fully fixed or fully free. Different philosophies offer different views, and this remains a topic of discussion in both spiritual and academic fields. If someone wants to study it more deeply, texts like the Bhagavad Gita and modern philosophy research can provide different perspectives for comparison. Another key idea is responsibility. When people believe everything is fixed, they may stop trying. But when people understand that actions matter, even in small ways, it encourages learning and growth. This shift in thinking changes how people face challenges. So this chapter shows a balanced idea. Life is not only destiny written somewhere, and it is not only random either. It is a mix of conditions and choices where human action plays a meaningful role in shaping direction over time. Have you ever noticed how old stories still feel connected to modern life, even when they were written thousands of years ago? Why do people still find meaning in symbolic gods when facing stress, conflict, or confusion? And can ancient ideas actually help us understand real human problems today without turning them into literal predictions? Across many cultures, mythology is often used as a way to explain human emotions and life patterns. In Indian tradition, stories connected to Shiva, Vishnu, and Brahma are not only about divine figures, but also about deeper ideas that can reflect human behavior. For example, creation can be seen as new beginnings in life, preservation, as maintaining relationships and responsibility, and transformation as letting go of old habits. These are symbolic meanings, and different readers may understand them in slightly different ways, which is normal in philosophical traditions. In real life, we see constant movement between conflict and cooperation. Society grows when people work together, and they struggle when division increases. This is not only a mythological idea, but also a real-world pattern seen in history, sociology, and even modern political studies. When people misunderstand each other, conflict grows. When understanding increases, balance becomes stronger. This simple pattern is often reflected in mythological storytelling as well, where harmony is shown as something that must be maintained, not automatically guaranteed. Another important reflection is inner change. Many philosophical interpretations describe transformation as something that begins inside human thinking before it appears outside in actions. When people let go of anger, fear, or confusion, their decisions often improve. This idea is also studied in modern psychology, where emotional awareness is linked with better mental health and decision-making. While mythology expresses this through symbolic stories, psychology explains it through behavioral science. Both approaches describe similar human experiences in different ways. It is also important to understand that mythology is not a single, fixed system. Different regions, traditions, and scholars interpret stories in different ways. Some focus on spiritual meaning, others on cultural history, and others on moral lessons. Because of this variety, it is not correct to treat one interpretation as the only truth. If someone wants to explore further, academic sources, cultural studies, and original translations of texts like the Puranas can provide broader understanding. In the end, this chapter shows a simple but deep idea. Mythology continues to stay relevant not because it predicts exact events, but because it reflects human life. It helps people understand themselves, their relationships, and the world around them in a symbolic and meaningful way. If everything we have explored so far is based on symbolism, psychology, and interpretation, then one final question remains. Where did the idea come from that divine forces like Shiva, Vishnu, and Brahma will conquer a place or the world at a specific time? And more importantly, is there any real source that confirms such a claim? From a factual standpoint, when we study major Hindu scriptures like the Vedas, Upanishads, and Puranas, there is no clear or verified statement that describes a fixed date where these deities will physically conquer India or the world. These texts mainly focus on philosophy, moral teaching, cycles of nature, and the understanding of existence. Over centuries, many interpretations have developed, but interpretations are not the same as direct textual statements. This difference is very important in serious religious and historical study. The idea of divine conquest often comes from symbolic language being misunderstood in a literal way. Ancient texts sometimes use powerful imagery, like battles between good and evil, to explain inner human struggles, such as ignorance versus wisdom or confusion versus clarity. When these stories are removed from their context, they can sometimes sound like predictions of real future events. But most academic studies of mythology explain that these are metaphorical stories rather than scheduled events. Another key point is how modern communication can reshape meaning. In today's fast digital world, short clips and posts can simplify complex ideas into dramatic statements. This is not always done with harmful intent, but simplification can change meaning. Because of this, symbolic ideas may slowly turn into misunderstood prophecies when repeated without their original context. It is also important to be honest about uncertainty. Different traditions within Hindu philosophy may interpret these stories in different ways, and there is no single universal agreement on every detail. That is why scholars, historians, and philosophers often encourage reading multiple sources, including original texts in translation and academic research, instead of relying only on viral content. So the deeper truth is not about a coming date or external takeover. Instead, it is about understanding what these symbols point toward. Many interpretations suggest that divine power represents awareness, truth, and transformation within human life, rather than a physical conquest of land or time. As this journey ends, the main message becomes simple. Destiny myths are not fixed predictions written for us to wait on. They are mirrors that reflect how humans think, fear, hope, and change. The real event is not in the sky or in the future. It is in how we understand life right now and how that understanding shapes the world we live in. As this journey comes to an end, one simple truth becomes clear. The idea that Shiva, Vishnu, and Brahma will conquer the world on a fixed date is not found in any verified ancient scripture in a literal form. What we find instead in texts like the Vedas, Upanishads, and Puranas is symbolic language that talks about creation, balance, and change in life and nature. These ideas are philosophical, and they are meant to help people understand life, not to give exact future predictions. Different interpretations exist, and this is why it is important to be careful when reading simplified or viral content without checking original sources or reliable translations. When we look deeper, we also see something more human than myth. People often search for fixed answers about destiny because life can feel uncertain. This is a normal human feeling, and it has existed in every time period. But mythology, when understood carefully, does not point to a single future event. Instead, it reflects patterns of life that we already experience: beginning, stability, and change. These are not events waiting to happen. They are processes that are always happening. Another important lesson is how information changes over time. Stories that start as symbolic teachings can slowly become misunderstood when they are repeated without context, especially in the digital world where short content spreads fast. This is why checking reliable sources like academic translations or respected studies of ancient texts is important when we want to understand meaning clearly. So the final message is simple. Destiny myths are not about waiting for a hidden date or external power to take control. They are about understanding how life works, how our thoughts shape our actions, and how change is always part of existence. What we call divine stories often point back to human life itself. If this story helped you see mythology in a clearer and calmer way, stay connected for more content that focuses on understanding, not confusion. And if you found value in this journey, you can support the channel by liking and subscribing, so more thoughtful stories like this can reach others who are searching for meaning too.